So, welcome everyone to this latest edition of Mentor Core. My name is Lisa Beth Lentini Walker, and I am one of the co-founders of Mentor Core. I also run the consulting firm Lumen Worldwide Endeavors, and we focus on compliance, ethics, and corporate governance and helping companies put values into action. Normally, I am here with my buddy, Dan. Dan, however, is on assignment because summertime means we all get to take a little break. So I'm running tech, I'm managing this whole process. So there could be some surprises in store. It's live, we don't know. And for those of you listening to the recording, I hope that you enjoy these moments. I am here today and I am so excited. Mentor Core brings together people from the compliance, ethics, risk, and audit communities and information security. And so we've brought together all of these different people. And today I'm so excited to have Kelly with me because Kelly's one of my favorite people.
Oh,
And she has so much to share. And I think there are so many different ways that we can work together and learn from each other. So, Kelly, welcome to Mentor Core.
I'm so honored to be on this, and you are so incredibly sweet. And I just, yeah, this is this is the fraud hashtag queen, hashtag sharing is caring, and you epitomize sharing is caring. So,
Oh.
spreading the word on fraud and just reaching out, this is wonderful.
Well, I'm so excited that we get to have this conversation about what fraud is, what you do. There are so many topics. As a reminder, everyone who's here, feel free to put questions into the chat, ask questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And always know that, Mentor Core and the people who are here are available as a resource. Like reach out on LinkedIn, reach out on Twitter, or wherever you show up on social media, we're probably there too. So let's get started with Kelly. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about you and like how you started your career and like what you care about.
So I am known as the pink collar crime lady. I'm wearing pink today. And I say my career has always been about money. So I started the Chicago Board of Trade, I became a stockbroker and a bond trader, and I learned how people invested and saved money until we had a client who stole money so he could invest. And then I became a special agent for US Customs, and I got to arrest, bad guys. Now, this is someone asked me this recently is did I arrest and get a female lawyer disbarred? And yes, I did. And she even went to prison. And that was kind of the highlight of my career. And that was, she did an advance fee scheme, like a prime banknote scheme. So it wasn't pink collar crime, but I didn't realize it. But it was the highlight, getting a woman lawyer disbarred and sent to prison. Of my custody.
Don't do bad things when you're on the watch.
And then I went and worked for a local sheriff's office, and I call it garden variety embezzlement cases on Main Street. And people don't think really of Enron or Bernie Madoff that it affects them, but embezzlement does affect people. And because your dentist gets ripped off, your kid's soccer league gets ripped off. There was a nun who just stole $850,000 from the school she ran. And so Kevin Bacon and his 6 degrees of separation in embezzlement, it's 1 or 2. I bet everyone, well, especially everyone on this call, knows of an embezzlement that hits close to home. And if you do, I would love to hear your story. So now I am just kind of the pink collar crime expert. I teach and I train and I consult people who have been victimized by an employee who they trusted.
Wow. So let's unpack a little bit. Pink collar crime. What is hashtag pink collar crime? Tell us like what makes it pink. I've heard of white collar crime.
So pink is a subset of white collar crime. And white collar crime, this is kind of interesting in the criminology world. It didn't even come to be until 1939. So prior to
Okay.
1939, people thought of criminals as icky people, as poor people, as mentally challenged people. But I mean, I think we all know that rich people can steal and rich people can commit crimes. But until 1939, we didn't think of that. And then fast forward 50 years, Dr. Kathleen Daly popularized the term pink collar crime, and it's low to medium level employees, comma, primarily women, comma, who steal from the workplace. So Marcia Clark got it wrong on her CBS Pink Collar Crime show. Don't ever watch it. It is 8 hours of your life you will never get back. I had to watch it. But it's garden variety embezzlement. And women excel at it. And why do women excel at it? Because they're in low to medium level positions. So, and you know what? There's other colors of crime. There's red collar crime.
Ooh, what's
There,
that?
that is actually a financial crime that ends in violence
Oh my goodness.
and or suicide. And there
So,
are two
wow.
people who specialize in that too. So,
Wow.
but Gil Geis, who is, he's now passed, but he's a famous criminologist. He said in 2012, he goes, what's this with collars? People don't even wear collars. And that was 9 years ago. And think about it now, like I'm not wearing a collar. So
I'm not even wearing pants.
yeah,
I mean, no, I'm wearing pants. They're just not like, nice ones.
yeah. They're like yoga pants.
They're like yoga pants.
Yeah. So pink collar crime is not just women committing any type of crime. It's my other hashtag, it's position, not gender. So women, 90% of women are bookkeepers according to Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's why dress pants optional, Jay. Yes. How about running shorts? I'm still in my running shorts from this morning.
Excellent. Yes, it's all good because at Mentor Core, we're just from the shoulders up, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so very interesting, right? This is a whole world that frankly I didn't get as involved with in my career. Earlier on in my career, I worked with the SEC, and we saw a lot of what I would consider to be white collar crime, particularly with securities fraud and things like that. And a lot of it was opportunistic or taking advantage of people's people's insecurities, et cetera, or their affinities, their belief systems.
Well,
um,
in white collar crime, there's a distance. Like even Bernie Madoff had a distance between him and the investors. I mean, Enron, there was a distance. Pink collar crime is that person's coming into the office every day. And well, maybe with COVID, they're not, but, and they're lying to the owner of the business every time they steal. So that lack of distance between the victim and the suspect, it's hurtful.
wow.
And
Yeah.
actually, I just did a tweet about hashtag embezzlement hurts. I had a guy, and I will tell you in the legal profession, call me a couple weeks ago, and he's devastated because he goes, I've known my now ex-partner since he was a teenager, and I am crushed that he would do this.
Oh man.
So yeah, so I kind of also am like the fraud therapist
The
because I'm
fraud
cheaper than an
therapist.
attorney to cry on my shoulder.
There you go. So, when you think about this, right? You with all of your positions, you've been in a lot of corporate positions. How did you decide that this was an area that you wanted to really focus in on, particularly with, it sounds like there's so many different emotions that go into this betrayal of trust.
So when I was sitting at the sheriff's office, and I remember it like yesterday, all of a sudden I realized that all my suspects, except for one, were women. And these were nice women. Like, you know, their kids played soccer with the soccer club. They are people that I could see in the grocery store, or they could live in my neighborhood. And prior to that, my idea of criminals, because I was a special agent and was armed and chased people, was bad guys. And at the core of my sort of this career is honest people steal. And there's the whole behavioral science, and I'm just like a total geek when it comes to behavioral economics and behavioral science, is good people can make a bad choice.
Yeah.
And I saw people that were good. Like a woman stole a couple $100,000 from her kid's school. And the detective I was working the case with, she said it was one of the hardest days of her career as a detective arresting her. So, it's when you arrest a bad guy, you're like, oh, good job. I got some icky person off the street. But when you arrest a mom or even a dad, and you think about the kids and how the ripple effect, it just, yeah, it really hit me.
Wow. Yeah. And in the chat, there's somebody who says, they have a great example. The office manager at her kid's orthodontist apparently ran off with tons of money, which she stole from their practice. And, had known this person for years. She appeared to be completely normal, right? We can talk about what normal is on the outside. But, you hear about these things happening. And then I think that there's also this level of kind of guilt, right? I had someone I knew quite well who had invested in something because it was the son of a friend and it was supposed to be a great investment, and was getting, updates and everything like that. Trusted him, had known this person for decades, and it turned out it was all a sham.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like decades of family relationships down the tube.
Well, and Lisa, dentists, 3 out of 5 dentists get ripped off. So anyone in the audience, like the next time you go to your dentist, after they've stuck their hand in, your mouth and everything, say, so I heard this crazy statistic that 3 out of 5 dentists get ripped off. And if your dentist is quiet, bingo, they've been ripped off. And my kids went to an orthodontist, and the orthodontist I kind of knew from a family connection. And it was when we kind of lived in a rural area, and there were a lot of people that were unbanked
Right.
because there were a lot of migrant workers. And she was shocked at the amount of cash that came into her office because these people don't have dental insurance. They're not banked, and they're paying for their kids' braces with cash. She's like, I've got $5,000 sitting in a drawer at any point during the week. And she had never even considered that possibility. She's like, these parents come in and they don't have Blue Cross Blue Shield, but they want their kids' teeth to be, so they're paying me in cash. And she had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you see all of this, right? What trends are you seeing in the space? Where do people decide to, have they always been somebody who was open to it? Is it just, opportunity, and is it the fraud triangle? Tell me what you think.
So you have the fraud triangle, and opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. And for so long, we've always focused on opportunity. And, that is, I'm going to say, the easiest one to lock down because you can lock everything down. Pressure and rationalization are much harder. So pressure, we have COVID right now, and you have certain occupations that never you would have thought would be affected, but they did. So for example, an orthopedic surgeon couldn't do surgeries because, they were elective. So what happens to that orthopedic surgeon and the office staff when they're not making money?
Right.
And then you have rationalization, and, you as an attorney in the audience is tone at the top. I just want to pound on people that, like, walk the walk. Just walk it, because your employees and your coworkers see what you're doing. And I use this example all the time. There's a guy who thought he was getting ripped off, and my friend dumps his data for him. And he has to explain who has what responsibilities. And he literally gets to Sally, his admin, and he goes, don't pay attention to her. She's too dumb to steal from me. Now, guess who stole? Sally. Yeah.
Sally was much smarter than she appeared.
Well, she had access. And now there's a famous speaker, and I'm not going to say his name, speaker, consultant, multi-millionaire. And I hear him on a podcast because I love podcasts. And they're talking about the financial end of his business. And he goes, you know what? Every Friday morning, I get a call from my guy, and I assume it's his accountant slash office manager. And he tells me what's in my bank accounts. He tells me what's in my bank accounts.
Why doesn't he
Trust.
know?
Here, look at this.
Why
Trust,
doesn't he know?
but verify. So he's the guy, he's not even, he should say, let's take a look at my accounts together, put a dashboard or something like that. But he just trusts people. We don't hire people we don't like. I mean,
Right.
we just don't.
Right. And I mean, so what's interesting to me is, particularly as people get, into the higher echelons of their career, they trust with their investments, they trust with their managing their money, they have all their people doing things for them. And so you see these like mega stars who have made gazillions of bucks, and they're bankrupt because they had somebody who they trusted, who
Yeah.
took out of the till.
Cuban got ripped off when he was it was his first business after his MBA program. And he actually said on a podcast like a year or two ago, he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him because he said it would never happen to me again. He's the second billionaire I am personally aware of that has been ripped off. Now, he goes, I did everything right. He wrote out the checks. All he did was hand them to Renee, his person, and all she had to do was put them in an envelope and put a stamp on it. And she used whiteout literally and put her name on it. But now this was a while ago. But people are like, how did the bank cash that? And apparently he went to the Texas legislature to try and get that not to be able. But banks, if you put it in an ATM, they don't read those. Like they don't. So
Not
this
right away for sure.
yeah, this also goes to I don't care how smart you are or how dumb you are. You can be ripped off, and I don't want to victim shame. I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and I'm like, I hate victim shaming, but business owners, you're in business to make money. Like most everyone is in business to make money, and at the end of the day, you have to make sure the money is actually there. But a lot of business owners, and Lisa, maybe you do this, is we run it through our head. You're like, okay, I have this contract. I've sold 1 million widgets at $5 a widget. I should have 5 million plus the contract. And you don't actually look. You just run it through your head.
Yep.
So
that's always the possibility of being a problem. And
yeah.
it's what, there's right. There's a level of control, and it's, you have to find that right balance, because if you try to control everything, then you can only grow to a certain point.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's, challenging for people. So let's talk a little bit about your book.
I just did a presentation the other day, and for a college accounting class. And one of the things, if you guys don't have the book, like hit me up, I'll send you a book. Honestly, I just want to get the word out. So, but I do have, I have these quotes at the beginning of each chapter, and I took such delight in these quotes doing them. So like the first one is, to be trusted is a greater compliment than to be loved. Like, I just, yeah. So I wrote the book during COVID because we had to do something worthwhile during COVID, and I can't go on the road, or I couldn't go on the road. So I finished the book, and I want the book to go to business owners because I want to normalize embezzlement. And how I mean normalize, meaning there's so much shame and humiliation when a master of the universe gets ripped off. They're embarrassed and they don't want to tell their buddies. Right. And they don't want to go to law enforcement. Only 15% of all embezzlement cases allegedly go to law enforcement.
Right? Because yes, I have seen that firsthand, because when someone gets ripped off, they don't want to say anything unless it is so bad that they can't hide it, right? I had I was working on a case a very long time ago when I was at the SEC, where a person had been preying on farming communities. And I remember having a conversation with an individual, and he actually asked his wife to leave. And then he told me, I don't want her to know how bad it is. And I'm like, wait, this is your spouse. Like, if she doesn't know, I'm surprised. Like, I was surprised he was talking to anybody, right? Um, so I think that there's definitely, people feel embarrassed and like they've been taken advantage of. There's a whole bunch of emotions. So I'm not surprised that it was only 15%.
Well, and so I have a friend whose husband got ripped off, and it's funny because when he first met me, he's like, "Ah, I won't ever have to hire you," and I'm like, "Fine, dude, whatever." A year and a half later, sure enough, who calls? And he's like, "My office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. attorneys," and I'm like, "Okay." So, and
Wow.
he's like one of my best advertisements these days. And I even tell him, I saw him a couple months ago, and I was like, "Hey, just FYI, I use your example all the time." But what I like to say about his is when I came into the office and he's got his, I'm going to say white shoed attorneys there. um, he wanted blood, and he wanted the guy, and it was a guy hung in the town square. And I actually had to put the brakes on. And I had to tell him, I said, "You're a really public person. And we will get this case adjudicated. He will go to prison. Don't worry about it. But right now, you need to worry about your reputation, because he has investors. And if the investors find out, they might flee." And
Right.
it was it was a one-off type of embezzlement, I would say, because there was a bank account that everyone thought was closed, except the CFO knew it wasn't closed, and they used it. So it was kind of a one-off weird thing. But
Right.
eventually it did make the papers, but it was hid in one of his LLCs. And it, so that's another reason for the book, is there are ways to do this, to investigate these cases, good and bad. And that's why you need to hire a professional. Like, you're not going to go to a general surgeon when you have, a brain tumor.
Right.
And I had another woman who got ripped off $500,000, and she's like, "Why do I need to hire you?" And I'm like, "Because your lawyer doesn't know how to talk to cops." And she's like, "Well,
Oh.
I think he does." And I'm like, "No, he doesn't." And so I'm kind of like the bridge, and we kind of package it up, and then we give it to the cops. Because the lawyer who called me a couple weeks ago, his partner stole, at the end of the conversation, he goes, "Why do I see people get put in jail for embezzlement? Bless you."
Thank you.
And I said, "Because they're low-level employees. They are low-level employees, and you're taking on your ex-partner, who is a very good attorney, and the cops won't touch it, because the cops are going to say this is a civil matter,
Right.
because your ex-partner is going to say it was an owner's draw. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, So there are ways to finesse that. If you're going through a divorce, law enforcement doesn't want to touch the embezzlement case.
Nope.
And
They
yeah,
don't want to
so
touch anything. They don't want to touch the children, the custody, nothing, because
yeah,
they view that as a civil matter, and
yeah.
some of
So
it is, except
we're
for the
kind of
embezzlement.
like, I want to say the Michael Clayton, if you guys have seen the movie with George Clooney, the Michael Clayton putting it together quietly so the cops do get interested in it. Because you know what? Law enforcement is beholden to statistics. They have to show that they've done arrests and they've gotten convictions. And a crappy case is not going to give them arrest or conviction.
Mm-mm. So, one of the challenges, it seems, is really putting this into a package that makes it seem like there was a criminal element to it, because Otherwise, it's a contractual dispute and it's just seems like a business misunderstanding. How do you identify this in a way that it's not just, somebody was, misunderstood or something got put in the wrong place, because a lot of times, especially with small businesses, there aren't as many procedures and all these other things like you would have with a really big business.
Right. Yeah. So, this is where you do need to do an investigation properly. There's a great example of Chipotle. Chipotle, and a long story short, Chipotle accused a manager of one of their stores of stealing $600. Well, the backstory is she filed a workers' comp claim and they wanted her to lie about it. And she said no, allegedly. And so they fired her and they said, we have you on video stealing $600. And she went and she got a lawyer. And the lawyer said, well, show me the video. And Chipotle was like, oh, it got erased. So sorry. They took it to trial.
Really?
Yeah, they took it to trial. And guess what? The jury awarded the, fired employee $2 million for loss of wages and $6 million for punitive damages. So the point is, she might have taken $600 out of that safe, but the week before they might have run out of tomatoes and she had to run to Kroger and get $600 worth of tomatoes. So you have to do a full investigation. And when you fire someone rashly without, I know there are lawyers on the audience or in the audience, but you need good legal counsel. I hate telling people hire a lawyer, but I only work underneath a lawyer.
Right.
Attorney-client privilege. And you have to have a good lawyer. I just got referred a case by a lawyer the other day. Nothing happened with it, but another lawyer gets on the listserv or whatever and says, I do these cases. Well, I looked him up. He's an estate planning lawyer. What does he know about embezzlement and working with law enforcement? Right. Get an expert.
Right. Right. Like you said, you don't go to a podiatrist for your brain surgery. We're working at opposite ends of the spectrum here. Get somebody who really knows what they're doing. And I say the same things about compliance and ethics and corporate governance. Don't hire a contracts attorney to help you with this. You need somebody who's been to the rodeo, kind of seen it, et cetera. And I know that in the security world, the same is true, right? Yeah. So very interesting. So you have your book that came out during the pandemic, but not only that, wait just a minute, because there's more. You started a podcast. Tell me about the podcast.
Okay, so shout out to Great Women in Compliance.
We love our quickies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was on, so I can't remember how they heard of me, but I got to be on Great Women in Compliance. And I was just like, oh my God, you guys are awesome. And I did work with compliance when I was at Nike and I really enjoyed it. Because it wasn't the whack-a-mole. It was let's fix the problem. Let's see, upstream and everything like that. So I was on the podcast. I so enjoyed it. And then I'm taking a run one day and I'm listening to it and it's their sort of origin story. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I want Great Women in Fraud. So I think I did a personal record to get home. And I get home and I text them and I'm like, can I use Great Women in Fraud?
And they're like, we don't own those words, but yeah, whatever.
and I had wanted to do a podcast 2 years ago and it would have been way too broad. It would have just been about fraud. And I get so many women generally who reach out to me and say, I want to do what you do, because everyone loves fraud. Honestly, just
Does everyone love fraud? Everyone loves fraud, right?
Hollywood loves fraud. As a matter of fact, I just got a great domain this morning, fraudandpopculture.com, because I teach a class on fraud and pop culture with Joe Irvin.
Nice.
Yeah. So everybody loves fraud. So 2 years ago, when I wanted to start a podcast, my virtual assistant said no. And she said, no money, just too much, da, da, da. But Great Women in Compliance showed me that I could narrow it down. The riches are in the niches, and no, there are no riches right now, but I love it. And
Not in podcasting necessarily, but it's not the only reason that you do this.
yeah, yeah. And I am just honored when someone, I've only had one person, and I won't say she turned me down. She just said, give me 6 months. I think she was waiting to see if podcast fade kicked in, but we're at like episode 36 and podcast fade has not kicked in. It's kind of all over the board. I've had a human hacker. I have open source intelligence. I have great dudes in fraud. So this isn't always just women guests. And I wake up, it drops on Tuesday. I wake up, and even before I put the little thing on LinkedIn, I have downloads, and it just warms my heart because
that's awesome.
I think I'm helping people, and we're here to help.
Right.
So, yeah.
I love it. So, fraud and pop culture. Sounds like a fascinating course. Do you have a favorite movie?
Oh yeah, right off the top of my head, The Big Short, man. I will watch it. I'd watch it once a week. I love Michael Lewis, even though I did just read his newest book, The Premonition, and I loved most of it, but by the end I was like, okay, I love Michael Lewis. And the fact that he could make, or The Big Short was made into a movie, I don't know. Have you watched The Big Short?
I have not watched. I've watched portions of it. But I have not watched the whole thing.
You have to watch it. Okay, it rocks. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I loved it. And actually, I'm pulling this out right now because this was when I was going to be, in person. I have this little quote here, and it's from Mark Baum, The Big Short. For 15,000 years, fraud and short-sighted thinking has never, ever worked. Not once. Eventually you get caught, things go south. When the hell did we forget all that? That is fraud. Like, everyone thinks, oh, I'm so smart, I can get away with this.
Do you ever think that people ever do get away with it?
Oh yeah, we only catch the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, truly, we only catch the low-hanging
the really low-hanging fruit. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, maybe, was it P.T. Barnum who said that you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time? As long as you get the some of the people rather than all the people, I think you may be okay.
Yeah. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Nothing is free in this life. I mean, but you know what? People are desperate, and COVID has shown, I mean, another part of, I think there have been some good parts of COVID. There's obviously been terrible parts of COVID. And, people are desperate. People are just desperate.
So let's talk a little bit about COVID. I mean, other than the fact that this has been the longest 18 years of 18 months, what trends are you seeing in terms of, does fraud change? Does it just move locations? Like, what's happening with that right now? And what should people know about when it comes to fraud in general? If you're in-house, or even if you have a family and you're trying to secure their financial well-being, what do we need to know?
So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners has done, I think it's 3 surveys of CFEs around the world, and everyone says fraud is going to hockey stick. Mm-hmm. And why is it going to hockey stick? Because we have pressures we have never had ever in our career. Like I said, orthopedic surgeons who have $1 million lifestyle, and all of a sudden they're only making $500,000 because they can't operate. Right. Now, I'm not saying orthopedic surgeons are going to steal, but there will be some medical professionals. I've seen it already. So we have financial pressures. And then from the behavioral science world, Dan Ariely has done this. When there is distance between the victim and the suspect, people lie more. People cheat more.
There's nothing but distance now.
Yeah, and there's nothing but distance now. And when COVID first started, people were scrambling to keep their businesses and keep their employees. And so all of a sudden, I mean, I don't know if it was Google or Facebook or maybe all of them. They're like, here's $1,000 Amazon gift card, set up your office. They're not asking for receipts. Or a small business says, we have to be able to take this client's payment. So let's just open a bank account. And they forget they opened it and they never closed it. We were scrambling to hold things together, and we were band-aiding and, covering up things to hold it together during COVID. But now that the world has gotten to kind of a new normal, we need to realize the things we did to just hold it together during the first months of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, so things that I've seen so far, right? Like there was a ton of fraud when it came to PPE.
Oh yeah.
A lot of price gouging too, and other things like not per se fraud, but like just bad practices that weren't consumer friendly. Um, and there were, controls that weren't developed really well that were done very quickly just to keep afloat.
Yeah.
But those aren't watertight, right? So I feel like it's been bubblegum and duct tape, but there are holes in the boat. They may be okay, but you can't bail fast enough at a certain point.
Yeah. So Reddit, do you like Reddit? Do you go on
Yeah.
Reddit?
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 hours later, you're like,
Right?
where did I
Like
go?
it's almost as bad as TikTok, which I do go on to.
I just asked my daughter if I should get on TikTok, and she's like, no, mom, you've got Reddit. Stop.
Time suck. And also I've learned so much.
But when the pandemic first started, there were people, and a lot of people, you go into Reddit fraud, and it's like, so my boss needs to get a PPP loan, and they have asked me to come back, and they're going to triple my salary, but I got to give, a huge part of it back to them. And they say if I don't do it, then I'm going to be fired. And you can't imagine the amount of comments that were about that. And again, honest people steal. They were desperate. And someone asked me on a call I did earlier today, is it desperation? A lot of times it is at first, but then, we got system 1 and system 2 thinking brains. Right. Everyone thinks money solves issues. And sure enough, it does initially. Right. Long term, you got to learn to live within your means, or you have to make a new budget or something like that. So money will solve it initially. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Grant. He got put in prison for SBA fraud in 9/11. He's actually just finally got his law license reinstated. From New York.
He got his law license back after that?
Yeah, he did. He's a minister, and he has this white collar crime support group. And going back to, low hanging fruit, he committed SBA loan fraud during 9/11. Mm-hmm. And he was just, I'm going to say he got caught up in it. Now, and so there are going to be people that are going to say, what about, and I can't think of a good one off the top of my head. Okay, well, this is maybe not a great one. Steve Cohen. The government is never going to get Steve Cohen. Never. I mean, they've tried. They tried every which way to Sunday. He lawyers up. He's not a low-hanging fruit.
Right.
PPP, there's low-hanging fruit, and they will scoop up the ones that, don't have a legal department to
back them up, or don't have the funds to get like the best lawyers.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So let me ask, what was your favorite fraud story and why?
My favorite fraud. I have so many. Well, this is kind of an interesting one, and I'll keep it a little vague. I worked a case. It was one of my first cases when I went out on my own, and it was a nonprofit board that was just very dysfunctional. And they end up getting the executive director arrested and indicted for embezzlement. And it's long and it's convoluted, but she had a life estate because her step grandmother had given her a life estate as part of this nonprofit. And, it was a house and property and it was worth money. So we went to, and the case went on for almost 3 years. And the prosecution overcharged her. Like they just said she stole. And we had receipts for these purchases. So they're like, she stole $300 from Costco, from the foundation. Well, we could show the Costco receipt and there's 50 pounds of hot dogs. And it's like, and that week they had an outdoor school at this farm. And it's like, clearly that wasn't personal hot dog eating. It was for, so, we pushed back. Long story short, we offered to walk away for just say $100. Mm-hmm. So give us $100, we'll walk away. She'll plead out to a felony and she'll leave. She'll leave the life estate and never you'll hear from her again. And they say, no way. No way. Lawyers. A year and a half later, we get them to give her a physical asset worth 1,000. So 10 times the original offer, but it's a physical asset. So they don't have to write a check. They can just give her something. And they do it. So it was crazy in that we asked for $100 in cash and they couldn't mentally get to writing a check for $100, but they could give something that they didn't care about that was worth 1,000. So the point is, sometimes you have to be creative. It made no sense. And actually, I was telling this case to a fellow fraud professional, and they're like, that's malpractice on their attorney's part that they would do. They could have sold the property when we asked for 100, sold it for 1,000, and kept 900 and given us 100, yet they didn't do it because they had such tunnel vision. So I like to say, being creative during a fraud investigation, look at every angle. So that case was so interesting on so many different levels. And actually, the only reason it went on so long was there was a D&O insurance policy. Wow. Directors and officers insurance policy that paid up to $1 million for criminal defense. Oh, wow. Yeah. So if you're on a nonprofit board, make sure there's a D&O policy.
Well, there's a good tip for everyone. Actually, not even just on nonprofit boards. Always make sure there's director and officer insurance. Whether you're an officer of a company or you're a director of a public or a private, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that there's something there to cover you. So, as you think about, what's coming up over the next, let's say, 4 years, 10 years, whatever, what advice would you give to people who are interested in being involved in the fraud space? Like, how do you get in? How do you stay in? How do you stay relevant? What would you say for somebody who's, coming out of college, coming out of whatever?
I am a certified fraud examiner, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. If you can take the test and you qualify for it, they do a wonderful job, and the amount of materials that they put out and the community is amazing. So I always say that's kind of step one if you're interested in it. Step two, pick up the phone. I didn't grow up saying, I want to be a special agent. I want to be like Clarice on, Silence of the Lambs. I thought I was going to be in finance. But I picked up the phone. My boyfriend, now husband, told me, you knew that guy was dirty. Call her up. And that's the only reason I became a special agent. So if you are curious, and this is an ongoing theme in Great Women in Fraud, in Gwiffies, is pick up the phone. Be curious. You and I met just like on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I've met people on Twitter. And if someone doesn't respond, give them another chance. And if they don't respond the second time, you just never know what someone's going through. But I really think, especially in compliance. And like I said, I've just been on the outskirts of it. People want to help.
Yeah.
And you know what? You don't want to be around people who don't want to help. So if you reach out to someone and it turns out they don't want to help, well, just forget them. But the fraud world, I think people really do want to help. And we can't, much like you and the audience, is we can't be a jack of all trades these days.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
what I
pretty
will
complicated.
say, what I will say to a lawyer is if they have a case and it's just not in my field, it's just, I know I will find the person who can do it. I will absolutely find the person who can do it. And yeah, Jay, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times. You know what? A couple months ago, I was on a podcast and I had said reach out, but you know how LinkedIn, you can't tag messages? I couldn't remember who asked to, for more information. So like all of a sudden the guy reaches out again and I'm like, oh my God, I am so sorry.
Right? It got lost in your message box.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard when there's multiple different platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you're using. Sometimes you get lost in the shuffle.
Just ask, most people are really happy to help. Most people are really, really happy to help. And this comes with, are you a Robert Cialdini fan of Persuasion?
Yes.
The reciprocity. And yeah, it's a huge thing. It is a huge thing. And there's someone in my industry, obviously, I'm not going to say, who is a taker. And, I've figured out over time that they are a taker. And it's like, do I badmouth the person? Obviously not. But I know that person is a taker. And I would never actively refer anyone, even if they're great, to that person, because there is no reciprocity and there should be. And I think the compliance area, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are givers. At least you have been to me. Oh my God, Send the Elevator Back Down. I love that book.
Yeah. So like any other industry, I'm going to let my true feelings show here. There are fantastic people within the industry, and there are people who I am very concerned use this as a cloak, because much like certain professions, whether it's teachers or the clergy, when you think about people doing bad things, you don't think about people who are in a position of trust. People who wear the cloak of ethics, you don't consider them to be the first person to be unethical, right? So I think there are absolutely wonderful people in the profession. I also think that we always need to be vigilant and aware and trust but verify, which is what we talked about from the very beginning. You don't think your fraud examiner is going to be the one who's actually conducting frauds. You don't think your compliance and ethics person is going to be the one who's doing bad things either, but it can happen. And so you always take things with a grain of salt and look at people's actions rather than their words, right? And I think that's true for every profession, but particularly for professions where you're expected to be the guardians, the watchers.
There was just an ex-FBI, retired FBI agent who just got caught ripping a woman off for $800,000 because she was on the super secret probation list, which doesn't exist. And he's an ex-FBI agent. So I just sit there and people don't think that an FBI agent can be bad. Yeah, it just,
People generally don't think clergy are bad either, but there are lots of examples of people in pretty much every profession making very, very bad choices.
Well, yeah.
And sometimes, and criminal choices at times too.
Yeah. Good people make bad choices. Bad people make good choices. I use this example. I don't know if you remember the guy who had 2 women that were in his basement for over a decade? He was like,
Which one? There have been many. Like, but yes, I remember there was that guy out on, I think it was the East Coast,
I
who
thought it was
had
like Cleveland. I thought it was in
Cleveland.
Ohio.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was Cleveland. I think it was like 3 people and maybe a kid, right?
Yeah. And so the person who went to law enforcement was actually a felon. It was, quote, what the society thinks of as a bad person. He saved those women's lives. Now, people that have poor interactions with law enforcement generally don't go to law enforcement and say, hey, I think I heard something. And law enforcement is like, well, why were you in that neighborhood? And blah, blah, blah. Point being, bad people do good things. Good people do bad things. So, yeah.
So here's a loaded question for you. How do you feel about people in our field or other fields who have done something wrong in their past and have reformed and are now speaking on behalf of doing the right thing? I know that there was an organization in my town that brought in, a couple of people who had been involved in a major healthcare fraud, to talk about what they what they did. And one of the organizations I worked for said, well, I wouldn't pay for somebody who had engaged in a felony to be a speaker. So what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so I have felon friends. I call them my felon friends. And it's kind of, I mean, the ones that are my friends, they are reformed. I truly believe they are reformed. Tom Harden comes to mind. Um, it's funny because some of them don't get paid at all. Like the ACFE never pays the fraudster who speaks at the end of the conference. Others do get paid, and ironically, they get paid more than me. And I had a hard time with that for a while. I had a really hard time with that for a while. But then I talked to someone who did an event, and he goes, you know what? Audiences are tougher on those when it comes to the reviews after the fact. And I was like, oh, okay. So make lemonade out of lemons. Like, I don't like the fact that like fraudsters get paid more than me, but I do think everyone should listen to a fraudster. I have a colleague who listened to Sam Antar of, Crazy Eddie, and he says, I will never go to another event with him. And I said, you're missing out. Like, I think, again, trust but verify. You have to see what they've been doing since it's happened. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say you can test them. Who is it? Andy Fastow. People are very polarized about him. And
I'm polarized.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I do believe that, like, if you have served your time, you serve the time.
Yeah.
Right? You do get to have the rest of your life.
Yeah. So I think we can all learn from them. I definitely think we can learn from them. I think that, we need to be a little more diligent. But I will tell you, and, again, the cloak is open. I've had felons that, I'd rather watch my house than I've had some of my coworkers. Mm-hmm. Because the felons, I knew to lock everything down and put it in a gun safe. My coworkers, I'm like, oh, they're fine. Oh my God, they're sticking a knife in my face. So just because someone has that good reputation doesn't mean they won't hurt you or they won't, throw a stick in front of you or something like that. So trust but verify. And I think on the speakers, we can all learn from everyone. Yeah. Unless they're like Sam Antar, he's very open. He says, you don't know that I'm not ripping you off again right now. So, yeah.
There you go. Well, I mean, this has been such a fun conversation, and unfortunately, we could go on for a couple of hours, but we can't go on for a couple of hours because we're not planning on doing a couple of hour event. So we are at the end of our time, but we always finish up with our signature question, which is, what's the best advice that you received from a mentor?
Now, I don't know if I actually got it specifically from one mentor, but I've had a couple of mentors, and they wouldn't be as I don't know, colorful. Let's just say colorful as I am. Always have the FU fund, the walk away fund, or when I was in my 20s, I didn't actually have the money, but I had the attitude. And I, knock on wood, have never had someone ask me to cross the line. I worked at a place where my boss, I know, asked my coworker to cross the line and she did it. He wouldn't have asked me because you have to know that you will walk away. And because I do mentor a lot of early professionals, um, you have to be able to walk away. And I just saw someone on the layoff.com, which I love the layoff.com,
Oh, this is new
post.
to me. Tell
Oh,
me about the layoff.com.
it's about corporations that have had major layoffs, and you can go in anonymously and post your experience and things like that. And oh,
Oh,
it's
termination Tuesdays and final Fridays. Yep. Well, I'm
yeah,
sure there's plenty of that out there. Not that I would know.
yeah.
But
So, but this person anonymously said, he goes, I just left. He goes, I don't have plan B. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't take it anymore. Obviously, he's like, I literally would rather be homeless than show up at this place again.
yep.
You always have to be able to walk. And it's hard when you have kids in private school, or, you have a parent that is sick. But I've done it with my kids. I'm like, you you will know that I will always support you to walk away.
Yeah. Yep. It's
So
good to have that in mind as like, there is no indentured servitude in the, where we are right now. Don't act like there is.
yeah. And don't sell yourself. Like, they don't care. They'll find
Right.
someone else to cross the line.
That's
There
right.
are plenty of people that will cross the line. Don't it As Ariely says, I love Ariely. At the end of the day, you have to look in the mirror and see a good person that you can live with.
Right.
And yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, with that, I think that's a great final quote. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to our listeners. And I can't. I've had so much fun this last hour. We have more events coming up. We are doing pretty much every other week over the summer. And the next one we have on the agenda is going to be fantastic. We've got Tiffany Archer coming up. So please feel free to follow us. And I also want to let you know that so many of the people who have been on this are participating in the Compliance Career Connections. If you're interested in this profession, these are free and it's a great way to meet people. And whether you're looking or you're volunteering, we can all make it for a better community. So thank you for joining us again, Kelly. Thank you for our attendees. And if you're listening to this on replay, feel free to join us for our next live session and follow what the CCC is doing. There will be links on our webpage to all of these things. Have a great day.
Thank you.